no drama, we got it. If you like sports, yeah, we got it. You like politics, promise we got it. Report everything hot at this college. PG News, yeah, right off the press. Reporters and filmers, PG got the best. Information that you need is reported. Make sure y'all tune in for what's happening next.
Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of PGCC Perspectives. Can we get a round of applause? Okay guys, so today we're here to talk about, everything political, problematic, and platonic. I'm Priscilla, your host for today, and I'm joined with Anaya.
Hello.
Today we're going to be having a few special guests with us here. We have the members of our newspaper. We have
Daniel,
Thibault,
Rio,
Kevin.
Okay guys, we're gonna have a really interesting conversation to talk about. We're gonna be talking about Gen Z struggles. There's a lot of stigma surrounding Gen Zers. We have things like how we're affected when it comes to the job market. We have things like, socializing with people after COVID. We have issues with representation when it comes to spaces like the government. So today we're just going to dive into a little bit of what it looks like to be a Gen Zer in this day and age. So first, guys, I'm gonna start with our question of the day. What challenge or what's one challenge that you think defines a Gen Zer?
I would probably, can we classify COVID as a challenge? Is that like?
Oh, yeah.
I would say COVID because I think that was like such a monumental moment, not even just in our generation, but in a general sense. It was such a monumental moment that kind of honestly changed the way the world really was at one point. Because a lot of people talk about, when you hear people in our generation speak about their lives, a lot of times people will probably kind of say, this was my life before COVID, or this was this before COVID, or this was like this before COVID. It's always like a pre and an after with COVID. And I think that in itself, that kind of trying to adjust has been really hard for Gen Z, especially with what has happened post-COVID and how COVID was handled and how a lot of people ended up passing away, unfortunately, how people had to deal with that, especially with our generation at such a young age. I think that would probably be a big challenge that defines our generation.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. So do you think, COVID worked in favor for our generation or against our generation?
I personally say against. I think it had more cons than it had pros. Like, I think the only pro I can really think of is that we kind of learn how to adjust more in terms of working with one another, like without being in each other's faces all the time. Yeah. But that's really the only pro I can think of off the top of my head, because a lot of the other cons, like I said, a lot of people passed away. A lot of ways of life are not the same anymore. A lot of places now have mandates. A lot of places now have where you can't have as much fun as you used to because of this disease. And I think it just kind of changed the way that people are honestly like allowed to live in a way. It's just, you kind of have to be a lot more mindful. Not saying people, well, I'm not going to lie, people weren't that as mindful before COVID, but now you are forced to
pay attention.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we have someone else answer that question to see, if we have a different opinion?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do both. One, because with what Anaya just said, I think another thing that people don't really think about all the time is, in general, like how humans are. Like, humans are made to connect with one another, and it's a lot different when you're in school or wherever you are, and you're forced to do that over the phone, on a computer, and everything like that, and you're not face to face with the person. We're made to interact with one another, and it's a lot more detached when you're doing that online.
True.
But I think another problem that has come up in our generation, and I think it shows in like everything that you talk about when you talk about COVID, when you talk about anything else we may talk about today pertaining to government, is the distraction of social media. Not only the distraction, but just everything that comes with it, misinformation and things like that. It was hard for us, especially during COVID, but even now with whatever it is, to know what's real, to know what is credible and what you can really look at and trust, to know what's going on in the world, and to know what you should do with different stuff. So I think social media has definitely taken a toll in our generation in terms of distractions and in terms of just knowing where to go.
So when you talk about information or news that is unreliable or misleading, do you think AI has a lot to do with that?
Yeah, I would say AI does. Especially now. I think back then, COVID, I don't think AI was as popular, but even just a few months ago, I don't think AI was as popular and had to do as much with misinformation a little bit. But right now, it definitely does. I think there was this one situation with, Trump where he filmed some video, but it was like people, it was suspected that he edited the video with AI or something
Yeah.
like that, or did some type of edits like that.
Mhm.
And there's just a lot of different videos are made with AI, or they're
Yeah.
just edited with AI, or just straight up AI. And it's really hard for people to tell. Like, even talking with my mom, because she is obviously a part of a different generation. It's hard for older people right now to really see all the time what is AI, because if you've never seen it, it is kind of hard in some cases, because it's gotten better. So it's hard a lot of the time to even know a lot of the stuff that's AI sometimes. So with us, it's a little bit easier, but sometimes even we miss it because of how good it's gotten.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's definitely becoming a bigger part of misinformation and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's move a little bit into, the conversation of the job market. Now we're seeing that it's very hard, for people in our generation and even people in the older generation now to even find jobs in the job market now. Do you guys think it's harder to get, into the job market, or we're just not ready?
I definitely think it's harder to get into the job market, especially with how many people are qualified and applicants there are. So imagine you're like, let's say you just graduated community college at 20. You're looking to get a job in your field, but then there's already so much other people competing with you, and
Yeah.
especially older people who are more qualified than you. And most of the time, employers want to go for those who have more qualifications. So the job posting might say they want like 1 year of experience, but then they're actually hiring the person with like 10 years of experience over the younger people. It's also federal law that they can't discriminate against older people, but there's no law against younger people. So they have more of an advantage over that as well.
So do you think there's any difference with exactly what you were explaining about the job market? Any difference between that before COVID and after COVID, or that's just, how it's always been?
I think there was definitely a big change after and before COVID. I think before COVID, the economy, speaking for the United States, the economy was doing pretty well. We were getting a lot of jobs and people were pretty stable. But I think after COVID, that's definitely when the job markets crashed, especially layoffs. There was a whole bunch of layoffs and employees getting fired at work because companies didn't have any revenue coming in. So they were firing their employees. And especially now, like with remote work, it's a little bit different too. So people had shifted to working at their homes. And even now, there's still some people who work remotely, but I feel like right now the job market's doing pretty bad compared to before COVID.
Absolutely. Does anyone have any a different perspective when?
I don't really have a different perspective. I just want to kind of add on about part where you were talking about like the older generations, how like it's easier for them to get jobs. And I agree, because I do feel like you kind of hear a lot of times how people who are still working, a lot of their employees are older. Like they do not, a lot of people, some employees kind of have a tendency to discriminate against us in a way, because a lot of employers will literally go out of their way to not hire Gen Z because we have this lazy like stereotype when it really is not that. I think it hurts us a lot because it's already hard enough to get into the job market, like, because they use AI to go over resumes now. Like it's not just one person just looking at everyone's resume. Now if it gets flagged, then that's it. Like you're not going like to the next round of like interviews and stuff like that. So it makes it increasingly more difficult having to deal with that. And then on top of that, having to deal with employers who already kind of don't, in a way, mess with your generation is kind of difficult.
So it just feels like the future is being made, or our decisions are being made for us, but by people that are so far away from reality or how we just live our lives.
Yeah. Another comment about what Anaya said. The older you get, people also just want to stop doing more favors for you because, the older you get, there's an expectation in whatever your career is to where you should be. Like right now, us being in college and everything, like for the most part, people are, depending on where you're working at, kind of looking to employ interns for the summers and stuff like that. But after you get out of college and like stuff like that, like people look at you as competition because that's what you are. Like you may take their job. So after a while, it turns into competition and people stop trying to do favors for you. And in terms of the laziness and stuff like that, it also makes it hard as well in that space.
Wow, that's a very interesting opinion, especially when you're talking about the pressure that's being, pushed on this generation, especially since we went through a pandemic. Do you feel like people in this generation can use the pandemic as quote unquote an excuse excuse to explain how we're so delayed when it comes to entering into, I mean, society as a whole, like job market, socializing with people, just society in general.
I've never actually thought about that before, but to be honest, I don't really think it's much of a viable excuse to other people. Like, of
Mm-hmm.
course, it does actually matter in terms of, how much
Yeah.
time people lost.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because people can say, like, we all went through it together.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what really
depending,
makes Gen Z really different from experiencing this than another generation also experiencing
for
it
sure.
too.
Yeah. And it definitely depended on where you were in life at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, when it first started really getting bad, I was in 8th grade and, I was going through freshman year and everything. But for other people, their lives were really starting around that time. Like you could have been
Yeah.
a senior in
Mhm.
high school and maybe not wanting to go to college yet. And so you want to join the workforce, and that made it hard.
Mhm.
Or graduating college and, looking for a job, that made it hard as well.
Yeah.
So, and I think another thing is that people kind of not forget about COVID, but just kind of now that we're so far removed from when COVID was,
Yeah.
people don't really think about that as much
Mhm.
now
Mhm.
as like how much people actually struggled back then. Like it's kind of like it's not a lost cause, but it definitely doesn't
It's overlooked.
hit people's hearts
Yeah.
as much as it did
Mhm.
back then, I think.
Can I get another person's,
Yeah.
input on that?
Yeah, I was going to add, I don't necessarily think that it should be, I don't want to use the word excuse, but I do think people should be more empathetic towards it because, like Kevin said, a lot of people in Gen Z were kind of getting to a point where we were about to enter the phase in our life, or you were like a couple years off.
Okay,
or
your
entering
brain
the
is
phase.
developing. Like,
Yeah, your brain is still
at the same
developing.
time.
And you were like a couple years off from going into like the real world. And I feel like while it's not necessarily an excuse, I feel like it should be understood a bit more. Like I feel like people aren't really as empathetic towards Gen Z. Not saying that we have an excuse to like do nothing, be lazy, or like because we really aren't, but like on their own, that's another thing. But in the case of understanding how much it does affect a person to be isolated for like pretty much a year, to have family die or people die around them, I feel like that needs to be like talked about a little bit more. I don't think it's fair to kind of just not you didn't say this, but I'm talking about like other people. Like to be like, okay, it happened, move on, because it's not that easy. And then on top of that, you have a world that you were promised that's just like falling right before your eyes. So it's kind of hard to adjust to that, especially as a young person when you're trying to discover yourself, you're trying to understand what you want to be in this world, in a world that's crumbling. Like that's hard.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's an excuse, but I do think it made it more difficult, and I think people kind of need to be more receptive to that.
Yeah. And before I move on to, have another person give an opinion on that, I do want to say even though I agree with both our guests today, my co-host Anaya and our guest Kevin, I do want to make it a point to say it's not really a black and white type of situation. To other people, like Kevin said, it's not really a viable excuse, but to Anaya said, it's not an excuse, but it definitely impacted a lot of different things. So we can refer back to it and be like, okay, we can't use this as an excuse, but it definitely impacted the way that we see things now and the way that we participate in society now. But there are also other generations that were also impacted by this too, like Gen Zers. There's a whole scale of Gen Z. Like some people were graduating college and some people were now starting high school. And outside of Gen Z, some people lost their houses, some people lost their jobs that they started up. So in my opinion, I don't see it as just, it definitely contributed to how we see our society today. So let's have our one of our guests, someone else. Yes, Thibaut.
Well, to me, I think it should not be an excuse, but it should be treated as one. Because personally, I think COVID was probably one of the biggest, most devastating things that could have possibly happened to me. Changed who I was. It made me the most anxiety-induced person ever. It truly ruined my social life.
Yeah.
And I still remember the very start of coming out of COVID, going back to class, and I just couldn't get words out of my mouth. It was so difficult to speak. It was so hard. I didn't speak the whole day, I think. It was bad. It truly ruined my social life because I genuinely didn't speak to anybody throughout the entire time. It was me alone and my siblings at home.
Yeah.
So it ruined me mentally. And I do believe that people at jobs, the employer should be patient with some of us who came out of COVID and is suffering with socializing. Basically, I think they should be a little bit more lenient on that. And try and help us out.
Absolutely. I really like the point you brought up about, the anxiety that was in so many people during this time, going back and not knowing how to interact with other people. Do you guys think the reason why it's so hard for us to comprehend how drastic COVID was because we're still recovering from how our brains adjusted to living in COVID?
Yes, I do believe that stems from even the amount of phone time we have right now. How much we are so invested in social media. I remember when COVID hit, everybody was making memes, not taking the situation seriously, and this is what's going on right now. Exactly 2 months ago, someone died in cold blood in a crowd. Something that you might
Well, can
just
you be
hear
more
it.
specific on what?
Charlie Kirk,
Yes.
what
Okay.
happened, right? And there's something that you might just hear in history book or reading history books, right? But it happened is on video and it was going around for days, right? And if you go on TikTok comments right now, you're gonna see memes. I just think this generation is so desensitized about what everything that's going on. I would blame COVID, but it started before COVID.
Yeah. 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 Very
COVID
interesting.
COVID did amplify everything that's going on right
Yeah.
now, but it started before. Like, for example, young people now are more quiet. A 17-year-old 20 years ago, after school, they had magazines, no phones, just magazines or TV time.
Yeah.
They had not much telephone time with their friends because
They
you
didn't
got
have
the
that
big.
much exposure to
That's
the
what I'm saying.
internet.
When you come home now, you got Netflix, you got Hulu, you got Crunchyroll, you got Paramount, you got all these type of websites
Yes.
where you can just immerse yourself for hours
And talk
without
to
having
yeah.
no interaction with nobody. We always have conversations where we say that, okay, it's very hard for us to appeal to the younger generation now because everybody's on their phones. We are so quiet in real life, but we are so
Bold over the
bold,
internet.
arrogant with our opinions on the phones and social media. And I
Yeah.
think that kind of reflects what is going on right now where
You're not actually willing to do something in person, but talk about it online.
exactly.
That's yeah. I really like how, you mentioned that because now I want to draw our attention to, Gen Zers in government today. A question that I would like to ask you guys is, do you think Gen Z is too disengaged from politics to demand real change in real life and not just, on social media?
I don't think we're disengaged with it. I just think that a lot of us are kind of expecting somebody else to jump and do it. And then also, I feel like Gen Z is a little bit split. One side wants one thing, and there's another side that wants another thing.
Yeah.
And that in itself causes a lot of like friction within our generation. So that's already bad because now you got a community of people who are divided and arguing against each other. Then when it comes to trying to actually make change, do not mind being the ones to get up and actually make this change. But then I feel like the flip side, like Real was talking about, there are people who are just quiet. Like they don't.
Yeah.
It's like they're more bold on the internet than they are in real life.
So it's like all intertwined.
What I think a good thing about this generation, I would say, is they realize we have little effect and little power.
Little effect. What do you mean we have little effect?
Even if we should always, everybody should vote. If you have the possibility to vote,
Yeah.
you should vote and you should let your voice loud. But now politics is showing us how we can't control anything in a way. There's so much we can do. We can expose, show what we think on social media, but is that really going to change anything at some point? Are people in politics really going to take seriously what the younger generation has to say? I think the unseriousness that comes with social media right now, not taking politics seriously, comes from actually knowing that there's nothing much that we can do. There's little effect that we can have on politics right now. And even if we should navigate this power that we have on politics differently, we should still research, we should still engage. But there's a line that we there's so much that we can do at some point. And I think this generation, now the Gen Z generation, I think we realized that.
That was really good. I like those, conversation pieces that you brought up. It was very interesting. We're going to have our co-host Anaya give her opinion, and then we're going to have one more question, and then we're going to wrap up for today, guys. So
I'm not gonna say I'm disagreeing with him, but I want to add on.
Yes.
I do think I think we can be engaged with like we can do something. I just think that what we have to do, people don't want to do it. Realistically speaking, I feel like we're getting to a point where we might have to like for real stand up for ourselves. I just think that it is known that humor is kind of our weakness, number one, because we can't take nothing serious, and then number two, like I said earlier, I feel like somebody's waiting for somebody else to jump. We had a moment during Black Lives Matter when everybody was kind of going out and protesting. Then people are protesting now, like the No Kings protest, stuff like that. People are already kind of trying to deal with the ever-changing world as it is. That's just my opinion.
Does anyone have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I wanted to add on to the part. I feel like Gen Zers are like discouraged, and we have that mindset where we don't really like we can't do anything. But I feel like it's important to remember that the power is in the people. Like we elect the officials who represent us. So if you're not happy with something, then you need to make it known, like call your representative, tell them how you feel, because that actually works. Like if you put pressure on them, they're gonna change their vote. Or when you go out and vote for an official, make sure you like research on what exactly their policies are and what they stand for, so you voting for the right person. And I feel like that's just important to understand, because we need to like really put it out there that these people in power, they're not in power because they got there themselves. We put them there and we can take them out at any time. So I think that's important to remember that we have the power. And make sure to vote in November.
Make sure to vote, guys. Make sure to do your research. Make sure to go out there and vote. So, one more question. This question is, is it really about representation or participation? Since we're talking in the context where we're talking about, young people having representation in the government, do you think it's really about, having representation or having participation?
I mean, it's a little bit of both, but I think I'm leaning more towards the side of participation. To add on to everything y'all said with the last question, I did think about how I think another problem is honestly the education about just like knowing about the government and everything, because not every high school has a government class. I personally did have a government class, but I mean, we all know the stuff that we learn in classes, we don't always remember after we pass. And another thing I'll say, because to be honest, like a few years ago, I really was on the side of like, I felt like it was nothing we could do in politics. I didn't really pay attention to politics or anything like that, because the stuff that happens is just like, there's a lot that goes on. Like with now Trump, it just feels like he can do anything he wants at any time. Like anytime he gets ready, the people who he has representing different departments, like the Defense Department and different things like that, is just corrupt at this point. So, from a perspective of someone who really used to feel like that is really nothing we could do, it is hard sometimes when you look at it from an outside point of view, because it feels like politicians, they can do whatever they want, and regardless, whoever you vote for feels like, votes are either getting tampered with or something's happening to the point where, votes are getting swayed. And I think it's hard because you don't see immediate. I think a big thing with our generation is like seeing the immediate effect of something, and you don't see that at all when you vote. I mean, it takes a long time, and honestly, even with the end result, you still may not notice how your vote really affects things. But yeah, so I would lean more on participation, to be honest.
Absolutely. Wow, we've had a very very insightful conversation today. We've listened to different opinions from different people, tackled a lot of very interesting conversations. And I would like to say, guys, even though it seems that there's no hope for you in government, or in the job market, or socializing in society today, just know that there's always hope for you. You can always insert yourself in spaces that can help your generation, grow and be better than the generations that have already come. You always have a voice. So never look down upon the voice that you have, no matter how small it is. As long as you have a voice, you can always do something. That's why it's so important to have these conversations and think about these questions, no matter how hard it is to have conversations like this, to, encourage each other, to let each other know that it's never too late to let your voice be heard. Thank you guys so much for joining me on today's episode. And thank you guys for listening. And make sure to go back and listen to our previous, conversation that we had about, the effects on AI. Well, it was good catching up with you guys. We'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.